Hello, Utah parents. Welcome to our No Porn November class for the month of November. I am so excited to get to introduce you to two people who I think are incredible in this fight against pornography. My sweet friend Danny from Your Living Proof. It's an addiction recovery program.
Yep.
And he's got a lot of great things that he can share with us. And then my personal friend, Sally Alley, who is a parent and can give us a parenting perspective on pornography. Now, to give you a little bit of a backstory, I think it was about a year ago, I was able to attend a workshop that Your Living Proof did, put on by Danny, and Raising Kids in Combat. And he actually partnered up with a young man named Smith Alley, who is Sally's son. So
full circle.
Yeah. So for this workshop, Danny and Smith, so he was a senior in high school when he was doing this. So Danny and Smith put on a workshop explaining their experiences with addiction and what parents needed to do to create a safe space in their home where they could talk about these things and really try to address the root of the issue and try to play defense, play offense instead of defense. So trying to prevent pornography and trying to deal with it, to being able to talk about it. So as Smith, who was a senior in high school, was sharing his experience, he talked about the fact that he was addicted to pornography several years earlier. And he talked about how he would get away with it, what he did, what it looked like for him, what he wished would have happened. And he talked about what parents needed to try to prevent that from happening, or what parents needed to be aware of. Now, it was at that moment when I was at that workshop that I had the insight. Well, this is really interesting coming from the teenager, but I want to talk to the parent. I want to find out from the parent's perspective, how she dealt with him in that scenario and helped him get through it to the point where he was this wonderful, outgoing young man who is able to share his experience with others. So that's when I reached out to Sally and said, Sally, would you be willing to share this with other parents so that they know that they're not alone, that they can maybe navigate through some of these mistakes to know what worked, what didn't work, what does she wish she would have known, and kind of put the whole picture together, including the parenting piece of it. So that's why we brought in Sally, was to hear her experience and perspective. But what we'll do is turn it over to the subject matter experts, who are Danny and Sally. So again, Danny has just been so gracious with us. They share a lot of their material, and we're just really grateful for everything that they do. And we'll put links up on the website to go to their website where you can check them out and get more resources from them. And we'll be posting some material throughout the month of November from them as well. So with that, welcome to our November parent class. And I'm going to turn it over to Danny and Sally.
Let's do it.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, Nicole.
If there's anyone on the live who can't hear us or there's problems with the audio, maybe just let us know. That would be great. The simple fact that standing next to two women and hearing that word, No Porn November, it's both great and it's both terrible. The fact that we're talking about it is great. The fact that we're learning how it's affecting our young people, how it's affecting us and even our spouses is the path we need to be on. It's just when I was younger, when they talked about Sally's son Smith and he was younger, it wasn't talked about. So even when I still hear adults say it, I just feel so proud and excited that we're now addressing the elephant in the room. On the way up here, which by the way took an hour, so some sacrifice was put in to come up here and hopefully share something of value with you. I was sitting on the freeway in traffic, and I received a call from a young man I've been working with for quite a while. I told him where I was headed. I told him what I was going to talk on. And I said, hey, what would you say? Now, this young man's life it's in shambles at this moment. It's been in shambles for a little while now. And I said, what would you share with any mother, father, grandmother, aunt who's listening about the effects of pornography in your life? And I hope I can say word for word how he said it, because it brought me to tears in my car. And he said, when I was 10 years old, and this was oh, what time is it? This is about 25 minutes ago that this was stated. He said, when I was about 10 years old, I felt like someone kidnapped my soul. And the truth is, it would have caused me a lot less heartache, and it would have protected so many people around me if I would have just been kidnapped. And I thought, wow. At 10 years of age, his soul was kidnapped by pornography, and he developed a secret. Now, if any of you know me, again, I was introduced. It's Danny with Your Living Proof. That's the handle on my social media pages, my website, Your Living Proof. And my mantra is that it's our secrets that keep us sick. He had a secret, and that secret kept him sick for quite some time. Over time, it became heavy and unbearable, and it just became crushing. So when anything would come in to take that away, even if it was wrong and he knew it was wrong and he was told it was wrong and he knew he shouldn't do it, he welcomed it because he needed this feeling lifted from him. I just couldn't believe that he used that term, my soul was kidnapped. And you know what? It would have been better if I was. It's now destroyed the life of his wife, his 3 young children. It's caused a divide between his mom and dad and certain siblings in their family. And it's really wreaked havoc in their life. So I said, well, what would you say? What do you say to him? And the answer was to do everything humanly possible to help your son or your daughter when it happens, because it will. Because it has. It already has. And I was like, what does that look like? I think I started pushing his buttons a little too much. He's like, well, I don't know what that looks like. I'll have to think about it. But I share that because it's a relevant example, and it's happening everywhere and far too often. I'm going to get into who I am and why I'm here, but I just want to start out by saying the term No Porn November. Obviously, it's a big enough problem that we put an effort into it for 1 month of the year to everyone recognize it. But there's also another term that's used. This is the nature of it. It's the most shameful thing. There's so much stigma around it. Anything to do with sexual misconduct, sexual confusion, sexuality in general. Most people refer to it as No Nut November. So I'm sorry, Mom, if you're out there listening. But to explain what that means, I've questioned many people who don't even know what that is referring to. You may or may not already know. So there's No Porn November, which is like the socially accepted term. And then what's known on social media and all these platforms around the world by millions of young people is No Nut November. And that literally derives from an orgasm. What the kids use these days is to bust a nut, meaning I just had an orgasm. So they're saying No Nut November. I know that the relevance of that may or may not be important, but there's so much behind this, it's even hard to say. There's so much surrounding this, it's even hard to articulate or to even hear. I'm sitting here today, drove up here an hour, sat in traffic for what? For nothing other than to plead with you that hopefully someone out there will make the necessary changes in their home to avoid this catastrophe. It really doesn't take much other than us stepping out into the dark of something unknown that's scary that we don't want to do. I made a few notes that I wanted to touch on, so I'm just going to check those. But my name is Danny Deaton, and I am about 15 and a half years clean from what I know to be still to this day one of the worst drug addictions I've ever heard of. Believe it or not, 16 years ago, my dad and brother found me dead in the basement of an abandoned home. I was 100 pounds. My eyes were sunken in. Every vein in my body was black. I had endured a path of destruction for some time that led me to a very scary place. I was homeless. I was incarcerated. I'm not going to get into my story. You can look on my website and watch the story if you're interested. But it is beyond a miracle that I'm here today. My friends and many other people I grew up with are all either gone, some of them in prison. And all of it started with small little secrets. So I learned a lot during that process, and I have a passion for helping other people. For full transparency, so I'm 15 and a half years clean from drugs and alcohol, about 11 years, roughly 11 years clean from pornography. I'm going to share one tiny personal example, and then I'm going to touch on a few points and turn it over to who you really want to hear from. I was in recovery for about a year when I met my wife, who is the absolute most dynamic human being I've ever met. And I was a year into this process when I met her, and I fell in love. I literally was swept off my feet. I had hope again in my life. I had a secret. What set me free was working through everything, and I worked through everything but that one little thing. Everything else was gone. The illicit drugs, all the hardcore stuff, the alcohol, the nicotine, the smoke, it was all gone. Still had this one little secret. Well, it was about a year into our marriage when she found pornography on my phone. And goodness gracious, in that time period, how much pornography's evolved is crazy. It was much different back then than now. But nonetheless, I came home from work one day. I worked really hard. I worked in a bakery covered in flour, getting up at 3 a.m. I come home exhausted, and I walk in the door and sitting there on the couch. And again, I'm in my 30s at this point. So just to paint the picture, her parents had come in town. They lived in St. Louis. My parents were sitting there. And I walk in the door and she says, "Sit down." Holds up the phone and says, "You can explain this." That moment, to just give you the insight to why I'm sharing this part of the story, was more humiliating to me. It was more difficult. I just wanted to run. Like the thought came over me to just open the door and bolt down the street. Never come back. I don't know, whatever it took. Maybe to blame it on something or try to excuse it. But that moment right there was more humiliating than being in a courtroom and getting handcuffed and hauled off to jail. That moment was more embarrassing than when my family first visited me when I was incarcerated and saw me on the other side of a plexiglass wall in a jumpsuit. It was one of the most horrendous experiences. But what she did was create this opportunity for me to change. So I only share that because often I neglect that part of my story, because what trumps it? Well, it trumps it is that I developed this addiction that's illegal and I got into trouble and had to spend time. But I was able to work through that and still had this secret of pornography in my life. So I'm here because I have experience. Years ago, I got out of the restaurant world we were in. We sold out our store, and I went and got licensed and certified as an interventionist to help families who have a loved one suffering from addiction. There's plenty of resources out there for someone with addiction. There's places to go. There's government facilities. There's funding, all this. But the person that's actually carrying the burden, the mom, spouse, the parent, are lost with no resources of what to do. So that's where I dedicated all my time. And then in the last several years, I've worked with a lot of families. I don't know the exact amount, but in the hundreds. Every single person that I've worked with under the age of 45 who is now in a life-threatening situation with either their alcoholism, their drug use, their life's completely ruined, was started by what? Porn. Every single one. Now, I'm not claiming that's every person to ever have a problem started there, but with all the people I've worked with who reach out to me finally when their loved one's sick, like they're going to die, like they're facing charges, they're homeless, we don't know where they're at, they're out of control. If you trace back to where it started, it is the pandemic of our generation. It is the plague of our society. When I was younger, it was kind of like this. Your parents were all worried about the hippies, or like the people with long hair and earrings who, smoked weed. I mean, goodness, now those are people are like, you feel comfortable around. But the gateway drugs when I was younger were different. And here's the reality. Our kids are no different than we are. We're no different than they're no different than us when we were their age. But the world has changed. Everything has changed. What they're facing is completely different. The gateway into hell is porn. It's the gateway to everything. I've seen it with the gateway to eating disorders, to gambling, to everything you can imagine. Why? Because it's the only drug out there that you don't have to go looking for. It will find you. It will find you no matter what. No matter if you're looking for it or not, no matter how many filters, no matter what systems you have in place in your home to protect it. If you live under a rock, it will find you. What I want to share with you tonight, and hope that's of value. I wanted to set the stage that what I'm bringing tonight is hopefully more of a practical and personal understanding. I have not met a single mother or a spouse in as long as I can remember who thought, you know what, there was a pretty good chance this was going to happen. We were prepared. It is always, every time, complete shock. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened to us. We've taught them better. Like they knew better. The days of avoiding it and hoping that doesn't happen, the days of praying that it won't happen, the days of just thinking that we've done the right things and it won't happen are over. They're gone. Natalie mentioned something when introducing us. If we don't learn how to play offense instead of defense, there's no chance. So I want to talk about a few things. And number one is when do you start talking to them about it? It's a fair question. The first time I talked to my kids about it, I was terrified. I do this for a living. I have no filter in my mouth. Everything that happens I say, like, yep. Did I live in a storage unit once and soil myself and have them open the door to repossess me and find me living in there? I did. It happened. Not afraid to say certain things. But when I sat down with my own children, I started doubting myself. Ooh, like maybe the youngest was too young. Or maybe I should do it separately. Or maybe I should tailor a conversation to each one of them. It's hard. So the question is when? When do we talk to them? I had a guest on my podcast who is a remarkable person, and many of you already may know who she is. Her name is Tammy Hill. She's a professor at BYU, Brigham Young University, and she specializes in sex education. So it's cool. Like she is the coolest cat when it comes to anything sexual, because when she speaks, it's kind of like going into a therapist, right? We all have this woman, the therapist, that's just so calming and soothing, and everything they say is so perfect. That's her. Why? Because she's so confident, so understanding, so aware and informed that she can speak to you in a good way. So we had her on the podcast, and we asked before, we said it was on our podcast, Your Living Proof podcast. And I said, okay, we've had a lot of questions. And the number one question is, when do I start telling them? Her response even blew me away. The night you bring them home from the hospital when they're born. I was like, what? I thought we're going to have to cut that part out in the podcast. But hear me out as to why. Her reasoning, it transformed my life. How I look at this, how I parent, how I plead with other parents to do this. She said, listen, they don't know anything you're saying. We all know they don't understand a word coming out of your mouth. But you might need a few thousand or a few hundred times to practice yourself. You might need that time to understand how you really feel about it, where you stand on it. Not because you read it somewhere, someone told you, but what is your real feelings? What is your convictions? And I thought, wow. And she said, and that's not only the reason why. And I said, okay, well, what's the other reason? Because you're talking to an infant about sex and porn. That's kind of crazy. Not only do you get to practice, but she said you become so it becomes so routine to talk about it that this mystique, this mysterious stigma about it is gone. And it was in that moment that I knew, like, I've never spoke to a single person that I felt more comfortable about the topic of sex than her, ever. I mean, she's a grandma and she is insane, talks about her awesome sex life and everything that it takes to obtain it. But it's because she's done this. She's done the work. So not only does it teach you how and when, but it just gives you the comfort because you've loosened your tongue and you've done it enough that it's not like the first conversation most of us had. I've laughed with a lot of friends my age, like when your mom like comes up and is awkwardly talking about Smith and I do the skit on our Raising Kids in Combat about the awkward sex talk. There's nothing awkward about it. If you can look your child in the eye and keep continual eye contact, that they can feel your sincerity. That is huge. So maybe your child's already born and you missed out on the first few times to practice. You can practice in the mirror. You can hear your voice, say it out loud. You can actually have the words come out, which is why I use the ridiculous reference in the beginning of No Nut November and what that really means. It's just kind of coming to terms with some of these words that they're hard to say or hard to hear. Where do you talk to your kids about it? And by the way, when I did talk to my kids about it, they were the first time they were 10, 7, and 4. I was so worried about it. I don't even get nervous speaking in front of groups of people of any size. I don't even care if people boo me, laugh at me, but I was terrified when I went to talk to my own kids because of how much we love and want the best for them. After it was over, I was so shocked, and we've had multiple conversations since. It's no big deal. They had some questions. Their questions ranged because of their age or maybe what they thought. Maybe it had to do with their swimsuit or something they actually did see. But I got it out. I did it, and it was awesome. And they received it well. They wanted to know more. They had questions, and it just continued on. So where do we do this? I think a lot of people wonder where. How do we do this? We know the when, and that's now, a year ago. Stop waiting for when. But how and is, for us, it's worked really well. And you may have heard reference of this if you're familiar with me or her son Smith, is in a safe place. What's a safe place? A safe place is a designated spot in our home, a specific location in our home. Has a few rules. For us, it's a couch in our bedroom. Our kids come in there and talk to us about anything. There's no consequences. There's no judgment. There's also no phones or distractions. It's not trying to have a conversation about something difficult in the kitchen when there's kids running around and all these distractions. Our phones don't enter the room. And I said no consequences, and everyone's like, ooh, that's kind of scary. There is always going to be consequences for our actions, always. But at that moment, in that place, and at that time, there's nothing. There's love. There's attention. There's complete connection with your child to be able to talk about these things so they feel safe and comfortable. Now, when things are wrong or they do things that are wrong and we talk about them there, of course, we revisit it the next day. We go back to the safe place. Hey, so grateful you shared that, what you did with me. Obviously, no, that's wrong, and we're going to have to do something about it. But it's the reverence we give it, the respect that we give it. And it's just kind of changing the dynamic of it just enough that we make sure that it's understood and that people are heard. I don't know if I'm missing anything. I'll probably let you guys just hear.
You can interrupt me later.
From the mom, but I plead, if anything I could share tonight, again, it's what I wish most is that anyone listening to this could come, like I could just put you in my back pocket by my phone and take you with me for a week and see the situations that these people's lives are in. All these people are incredible. They're educated, they're talented, incredible people. And someone in their home is in a dire situation. And what started it was a secret they had a long time ago at a pretty young age. Something they saw, something they were exposed to, and they just didn't have a chance to talk about it. So we got to do better. That's what we can do. We can face it head on. We can start playing offense instead of defense. So if you have any questions for me, reach out. Are we going to do a question after? So if you have questions, then let them rip. But here's what you really want to hear.
So,
yeah, but jump in if there's,
Yeah,
I mean,
I will.
if there's, jump in if there's things you can share too, as I share my. Okay. I also took notes. My name's Sally Alley. That is my real name. I married a man that I always say he's totally worth having the name.
So easy to remember.
I just to tell you a little bit about me, I was a stay-at-home mom of 4 kids, and we had pornography. If we're just going to get into the topic of pornography was a pretty common discussion in our home. We did feel pretty confident in talking about it, and we had friends that their lives had fallen apart because of pornography. That we even had a family friend that ended up living with us after his marriage dissolved. So it was a common topic. I had all the routers and all the filters. We constantly talked about it. My kids didn't have cell phones. They had purchased their own device or iPod Touch that they had, and I was naively thought that if it was under my Wi-Fi, it was protected. Anyway, that was kind of our home in a nutshell. We talked often about, not the if you are exposed to inappropriate content, but the when and what do you do? Turn it off, tell an adult, the crash and tell mentality. We had all the things. And when my son Smith was 14 years old, we discovered that he had been habitually using pornography for about 5 years. 4 to 5 years. He had been exposed when he was 9 by clicking on a banner that was not what it said it was or what he thought it was, and had its first exposure. And then about a year or a year and a half later, was again exposed to it innocently. For whatever reasons that I wish I could understand, I was not a place, nor was my husband a place that he could come and tell us when that exposure happened, regardless of all of the things we had put in place. When we talked to him about that, he says that there's nothing we could have done that would have made us that. So I'll get to my thoughts on that a little bit later. But that was one of my things, was that whatever that was. Now, I will say we didn't have a safe space set up at that point. I've learned a lot since then. We're a big proponent of the safe space. My son Smith calls it the no trouble bubble, that was coined after one of his mentors, as well as Danny, but Colin Karchner coined that phrase. And so he uses that a lot. I think it's because he says it's because it feels like it's for a toddler. And I think he likes to go back to that. So after getting some professional help and spending a lot of time and energy and money on resources and professional help in order to take care and help this problem, Smith came to a point where he wanted to share his joy after recovery and living in recovery. And so now he has started a foundation. He travels and speaks to school assemblies and youth groups and church groups and parent nights about Living Life Bigger is his foundation, the Live Life Bigger Foundation. And he spends his time trying to help his generation and his peers live a life outside of their screen and outside of understanding the harmful effects of pornography, social media, comparison, gaming, screen addiction. He partnered with Danny to create the Raising Kids in Combat workshop, which is a proactive parenting workshop. So why am I here? Why does my story matter? What does that have to do with Utah Parents United? And since going public with our experience, Smith decided to go public first. And because of that, I've had countless parents that have reached out to me in similar experiences. And the mom guilt, the fear, the anger, the sadness, those feelings that they express when they reach out to me, they're all the same. And it's often, when I talk with them, it's often right after they have found out that their child has either been exposed or has been habitually using or even has an addiction to pornography. But it's a regular part of their life. And I share with them that I know where they are. I know, oftentimes it's the day of or the day after, or, and they're typically in tears. It's oftentimes a mother that is calling me. And when I talk with them, I'm almost taken back in time. That memory is visceral. And I can remember, and I'm able to say to them, I know how you feel right now. I know that feeling that is in your stomach. I know the feeling of the tears on your face. I know the mom guilt that you're feeling. I know the loss of your child's innocence. And I understand all of those things. And I know that this feels like the very worst day, but it's not. Yesterday was the very worst day, when you knew there was a cancer. You knew there was an illness. You knew there was something going on, but you didn't know what. That was yesterday. And today we have a diagnosis. Today we know what the battle is. We know what we're fighting. Today is not the worst day. Today is actually the best day, because now we can figure out the tools. We can talk to people. We can find the resources. We can take this head on. When you know what you're battling, we can find the medication that is needed. So the enemy at that point. And what I have learned kind of from my experience, that my story is certainly not over. I'm not telling you this from a point of being finished or complete. I'm well aware that the battle against pornography for my son and my other children, as well as my grandchildren and my nieces and nephews, my neighbors, my community members, that is not over. But I have relocated the battlefield. And Danny and Smith talk a lot in their Raising Kids in Combat about the reason they talked about that, or the reason they named their workshop that, was because they want parents to realize that they are the commanders of their army. And if their kids are fighting this battle, then they're the commanders. And what I did, even though my fight is not over, my battle is not over, I relocated the battlefield. I feel like I have set myself in a position, and what we can do, all of us, we can put ourselves in a position that we have the upper hand. And knowledge is power. We can set ourselves, instead of being in the valley where we're able to be shot at and we're just sitting there vulnerable, we can place ourselves in an area where we are protected. So what do we do? How do we do that? One of my first things I would say is become familiar with the stats. So many people, it's ignorance is bliss, and it's bury my head in the sand. And as long as I don't know about it, it's not happening. These stats are not random numbers. These are your kids. They're my kids. They're our neighbors. They're our spouses. They may even be ourselves. So personalize the stats, and it makes it more of a motivation for you to expend the energy that is needed in order to battle with this and make a change for your own child and their family, your whole family. So some of the stats: 84.4% of males and 57% of females view pornography before the age of 18. So put yourself or your child in a room of 100 people and tell me by the time they're 18 if they will be engaging in pornography. What are your numbers there? And how do these stats make you feel more motivated to do something for change? 31% of teen girls say they've taken part in sex acts before their first kiss. Our kids, because of the sexualization that's happening digitally, they're skipping all of the first. They're skipping holding hands. They're skipping their first kiss. They're skipping all of these firsts and going straight to sex acts because they're being sexualized online. And so when you're looking, or when you're even having conversations thinking, well, could my child be exposed to pornography at this age, and you're talking about, well, they don't even talk to girls, or they don't even, talk to boys, or they don't, that is not the indicator. That is not how you decide when to talk with them. Gateways to porn are found through anime, Japanese anime cartoons, Pinterest, Instagram, Snapchat, even Spotify, and wherever you can find podcasts, you can find pornography. Porn consumption is connected to poor mental health and self-esteem. 9 in 10, 9 in 10 porn videos show acts of physical aggression or violence. So as our children are viewing this, what are they learning about sex acts? What are they learning about how to treat another human being? Unfortunately, 97% of the time, statistics say that is towards females, the violence and aggression. So what are they learning about sexual behavior, if that's where they are getting their education?
On that note, can I tell a story?
Yes, love it.
Related to that.
You bet.
It's, I'll just try to figure the best way to say this. Recently, a family I started working with reached out because their son had been abusing Adderall prescribed from their doctor to help. He was out of sorts from a few things. Well, it didn't take long to figure out that earlier just this summer, and he was actually mixing Adderall with alcohol because he found out that's an awesome combination. This young man, 16 years old, had a serious complication just this past summer at a church activity. He was in love with a girl. This young man, to paint the picture, awesome. Doesn't even swear, doesn't even use bad language, doesn't listen to bad music. Is what every mother, when you look at him, it's like every mother wants their son to be just like that. Awesome. Super kid athlete, super kid in school. Well, he had a serious pornography problem that no one knew about. At this church activity just this past summer, something horrific happened. The girl he loved was trying to court them, right? That we used to do when we were younger. He went into a tent where she was and basically raped her. Was very aggressive, doing all these things he shouldn't have, even horrendous things like spitting on her. The reason I bring this up is here is the critical part of this story. The families, I don't know how they worked it out, and I don't know all the details, but to be able to meet this young man and still see the complete shock he was in, and to hear it from both sets of parents that when this was addressed, he was in complete and total shock. Because what he viewed for so long, he actually felt like that was going to win her over, that's what would turn her on, that's what she wanted. People are like, well, that's ridiculous. How does that happen? Over time of viewing this so much, he skipped everything and went and did something, and he was actually in shock. He didn't even see why that was bad or that was wrong. He thought that's what she wanted because that's what he's seen over and over and over, is that being done to women and them liking it. That is messed up.
But it's happening. Yeah, absolutely. And happening pretty commonly. So thanks for sharing that story. Unfortunately, I am understanding it's more common. So this problem's going to be in our lives, whether we want it or not. Unless you move completely off the grid, don't take any tech, Wi-Fi, movies, and if you don't take anything with you, if you're willing to do all of that, you might be able to escape.
It's a problem. You can live on a farm, but you still have the internet.
You still have, yeah.
5G.
Yeah. So my position is, let's get armored up. Let's take control. This problem isn't going anywhere. It can feel overwhelming. There are lots of resources out there now, though, to do it right. We've talked a little bit about Danny and Smith's Raising Kids in Combat, which from an outsider's perspective is a great place to start. There are filters, routers, reporting devices, third-party parental controls, media agreements, conversation starters, coaching workshops. The sad reality is they are very underutilized. They, you know, they are minimally purchased. They are minimally, even people are not aware of them. And why is that? So they will deal with this the rest of their lives, our kids. Tech's not going away. So let's invest the kind of energy into it that we would do with anything that they're going to be doing the rest of their lives. We spend hours and even years training them how to drive a car because we want them to be safe. And we talk about the risks, the benefits, the pros, the cons, the costs, the gains. We put them through a class. We have them get a permit. We require that they do a minimum number of hours with a licensed driver. We take them to back roads and make them drive maybe church parking lots and require them to drive before we're able to turn over full control over a car to them. They are licensed and skilled drivers when we feel like we give them the car. So why is that different with digital devices? Why is it that with digital devices, we either won't let them have one at all, or we just give it to them unfettered? Why is that? I want to make a plea to dads. Dads, we need you. This is not mom's job. Smith on Instagram has 24,000 followers. He talks a lot on his Instagram about apps and educates parents about the warnings and, the risks and all of those things. 97 or 96% of his followers are moms.
It's the same as mine.
Danny's, this is the same. I know Protect Young Eyes, who is one of the leading experts in the country, is helping write legislature to try and protect this. The kids from big tech. Same thing. 96% of his followers are moms. Dads, we need you. You have something unique to gain. Why do we need dads? We need strong dads that are willing to have calm conversations about the power and pitfalls of the digital era. To protect them digitally as much as you would protect them physically. To pull them out of off of a metaphorical train track. To assure them that you have confidence in their abilities. You will help them navigate this until they are able to do it on their own as adults. They are not in this alone. When all of this came down with my son, I was amazed at my husband's ability to handle it without emotional disaster that was going on inside of me. He was logical, non-judgmental, and solution-minded. He got right to work solving the problem. You dads have something special that way, and we need you. Over the last 3 years, I've been blessed to meet and talk with so many teenagers about this topic, hundreds of them. They are not afraid of this topic. We are. Mm-hmm. They might be afraid of you, but they're not afraid of the topic being discussed. And in fact, they're discussing it on their own. They're sharing it. They can handle it. They are also more compassionate with the struggle because they have been living it to some extent, or someone they have has been living it. They're forgiving and supportive. They want to fight the fight. They want to battle this. They need us to stop being afraid and start being their advocates and coaches in how to do that. So how do we do that? Stop being driven by fear is the number one thing. Start asking your kids what they've seen, heard, and been told, as opposed to if they've seen and been heard and been told. What has made you uncomfortable? What have you seen or what have you heard? The other thing that I will say, coming from my mom's perspective, is listen to your gut. I remember going to bed almost every night in the last probably year before we found out about my son's habit. And I remember saying to my husband, I don't know who that kid is down there, but I don't like him. That's not my son. I knew something was off, but I didn't know what. And I heard over and over and over again, oh, yep, that's a teenage phase. They'll grow out of it. Danny has shared with us that they don't grow out of it. And it's not a phase. These teenagers, they are amazing, compassionate, happy, joyful, productive people. That is their nature. That is how they're supposed to be. Do they have bad days? Absolutely. But a phase is not years. A phase is not months of shame-ridden contention, hiding, isolation. Those types of things, if you feel that in your gut, listen to your intuition. That is one of my regrets, is that not that I wasn't necessarily a safe space, but that I knew something was off and I didn't push. I didn't do more to find out what it was. Know that it is a when, and be ready to react without judgment in a safe space when that time comes. Write a script for that day. Practice it. I love what Tammy Hill says. Yeah. It's the same thing. Practice it. Write down a script. Practice the script on something with less significance. Smith talks about how he tested the no trouble bubble one day when he got a 56% on his math test, and he came home and practiced me not reacting. And I was like, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
I love you. So practice it on something of less significance. See your kids test your reaction. Allow your kids to see you react in a way where when the problem's this big and mom reacts this big, how's mom going to react when the problem's this big? What's she going to do? She says I won't be in trouble, but she gets mad at me and yells at me for this small problem. Man, she's just that's just can't be true, that she's not going to be mad at me later. And then the other thing I would say is be proactive. Use the resources out there. There are so many amazing groups of people that are putting together resources out there in order for us to be the type of parents that we want to be, for us to challenge this battle and take it head on without just saying, oh, no phone for my kids, no social media, no nothing. And delaying, don't get me wrong, I'm very much an advocate of delaying. But just deciding that they're not going to get a phone, take it from me, until they're 18 isn't the solution. The solution is teaching them how to manage that. You're willing to spend $1,000 on a phone, some of you, most of you probably, I would say, have your kids that have a smartphone, and you're willing to spend $1,000. But when I talk to parents and I suggest that they purchase a specific router or a third-party parental control, or a Raising Kids in Combat workshop for $99, suddenly there's no money to be found. But the $1,000 phone, that I can get behind, and I can hand it over to them, and they're going to get it anyway in the world. So they might as well learn how to deal with it now. Be willing to use the resources, find them, talk to people, ask about them, try them out, spend the money on them, put the resources required into it in order to defend your family. So my greatest wish is that you will leave here feeling empowered and hopeful, not full of fear. Fear leaves us paralyzed and unprotected. The threat is greater today than it was years ago, but the resources we have to protect, insulate, and defend our families are also greater as well. So just being here as Utah Parents United parent shows that you're part of the right club. These are parents that are a group of proactive parents. They're determined to take control of your home, your communities, and your groups and your sphere of influence. It is the best kind of club, and I'm so proud to be a member. So I would just challenge you to take a proactive approach, to not be fear-based. Let's be hopeful. Let's be dedicated. Let's be, more empowered and dedicated to this mission. Super glad to have been here. So thrilled to have shared my story. Do you have anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just listening to you, it reminded me of something. Her son Smith and I, we're good friends. I'm truly old enough to be his dad by a long shot, but we're good friends. He has an amazing mom. It's easy to see that. I had an amazing mom. I do have an amazing mom. Both of our moms had done everything that you're supposed to do. If you read the textbook, let's do this, talk about this, have this frequency of this discussion, and put this place. We both did. What held both of us back from talking to these incredible women who were there for us, who would do anything for us, who would never judge us, who would love us regardless, was the fear of disappointment. That's a natural thing. So what's the answer? How do you get around that? If any mom's wondering, well, what do I do to make sure that they can come talk to me? There's no easy answer, but it's going to have to be practiced, and you're going to have to follow your gut, like she said. And when you sense something and you feel like something, don't bury your head in the sand and think this is magically going to go away. Those days are gone. You're going to have to fight it, address it, and just do everything in your power to just lift the curtain and get that secret out, and so that you can start healing. It's like you said, the worst day was yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, the first time I walked into a group and people, and I'm like, hi, my name's Danny, I'm an addict. I mean, that seems like the worst day, but the worst day was actually the day before, when I didn't have a path forward or any support group. And I do want to share one last thing I forgot to, and when I was presenting, just to draw some insight to the seriousness of this problem. There are far more heroin, cocaine, or alcoholics that are recovering, that are getting treatment, that are getting healthy and recovering than there are those of the sexual nature. Way more. In Utah, for example, and don't quote me because it changes frequently, but there was like 59 treatment centers last time I checked. I know many of them, most of them. I've toured them, been to them, know the clinical staff. The frustrating part is there were two, and now there's none at that level of treatment with all the resources, people, and places designated to go that address this addiction. Why? Because its insurance companies don't recognize it the same way as a substance. It presents a big set of challenges. And I share that for one specific reason. Because if you have a child that's an alcoholic, first of all, the stigma behind that has come so far that you're not quite as embarrassed. You'll admit it to your group of friends, your friends at church, the people that you work out with at the gym, whatever. Yeah, my daughter's an alcoholic. But my daughter's addicted to pornography and is a sex addict. It's a hard one to say. So first of all, the stigma is terrible. Second of all, is the resources are limited, but there are resources out there. They're just not broadcast the same way. Like if you were to Google, like, where do I go for alcoholism? Like there's this, an onslaught of things. But there are communities out there. There are groups. There are resources. There's mentors, just like she said. But there has to be some effort to find them. You have to reach out to people who know, who can help point and guide you in the right direction. But the only thing you should avoid doing at all costs is doing the typical route that everybody does at the beginning. We're just going to handle this in-house. It's okay. We're going to take care of this.
You're going to just stop that. You're just going to stop that.
And that's why most dads suck. Of all the dads that are missing out there, I know why, because I'm guilty of it as well. We were raised, our fathers were raised, our grandfathers were raised to just knock it off. Can't. So many, just tens of thousands of young people and adults across this state and the country, just, man, they wish they've been praying their guts out. They just be able to knock it off. Doesn't work. You got to get help. You have to get help. So the battle's real, but there are ways to do it. And I know for a fact that her son and myself, helping other people is a passion of ours, but it blesses our own life to keep telling our story because we don't harbor secrets and we practice what we preach. So I guess if we're done, I don't know if there's any questions. Yeah.
Are there any RKIC workshops coming up that she mentioned or something similar?
Yes, we're going to be holding more in-person events this year.
Yeah, do you want to repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. The question was, are there any more RKIC events, which stands for Raising Kids in Combat? the workshop that her son Smith and I created. Yes, there'll be many. There'll be business sponsored. There'll be some for the public. But to make it even easier, because we all know how precious time is, we've created those courses online. Now that's the part that's really hard, is Smith and I love hugging people and seeing them face to face. So in person is always awesome, but we know how that can be difficult. So they are also available in a digital form. And what's cool about this, though, that's different, is you don't have to come and take notes on everything, even though you do get a workbook. Once you purchase the courses, they're yours forever. You can go through them, refer back to them, watch them again, share them with your husband.
Go Dad.
Yeah, but those are available, and you can find them on the bio of either her son or I. So Live Life Bigger, right? It's at .org or at Live Life Bigger, or Your Living Proof or yourlivingproof.com. They'll post them. There's a link. Yep. Yeah. And we have, for any followers of Utah Parents United, we have an awesome discount. It's like 50% off or something. Yeah. So just because we know that you're amazing, that you're out there, you're the warriors battling for your children. You're not just turning it over to the world. And, when we were younger, it's like kind of this herd mentality. You had a kid, they just went in the neighborhood and they kind of raised them, and those days are over. It takes assertive, active parenting. So
yeah,
we know that's you out there.
Yeah. I was just going to say also, just in case there's anybody listening that's interested in something like this, they do bring it to like communities or businesses where, they've had businesses that have paid for it and invited all of their employees and their spouses to come. And it's been a really awesome experience to watch that too. I just kind of tag along. Yeah. So I get to go and watch this, and what a super cool benefit for employees to have. So that's a possibility too, to bring it to your community, and it's very affordable to do that. Yeah. So
is there any other questions immediately? I wanted to just one other point, and then that will be all I have to say, is the nature of these addictions and how they are progressive. So if there's anything in you that's holding you back, when for every mom that's found something, caught their son doing, saw something on their phone, or every spouse, and they kind of turned a cheek and hoped that was just this one weird instance. Every addiction is progressive. People don't even like the word addiction. It's an arguable thing. I'm just it's just my world. A lot of people say bad habits, and they're just doing things they shouldn't, whatever you want to call it that makes you feel comfortable. They are so captivating, and they are progressive. I have lost count of how many incredible young men who came from these families that everyone would look at the pillars of our community, who at some point saw something innocent. If they clicked on a banner, something popped up, something maybe came through on a video game. The progression of it is they saw it at this age, and then down the road, either it progresses into cross addictions where they're carrying so much shame and guilt that now they're welcoming things like abusing prescription medication, drinking, smoking marijuana, vaping, whatever. Or it progresses into things like I just stated, these young men who come from these incredible families who are now facing serious consequences. Inappropriate underage content, seeking out sex from people because of the drive from that. The content that people view is progressive. So I share that not to like alarm you, and I'm sure most of you can assume that happens. But in the beginning, what seems like threatening yet somewhat innocent, always over time, for some people it's quick, for others it's slow, gets to a point where it's either extremely dangerous, it's illegal, or it crosses into other things that become life-threatening every single time. So don't be the person who thinks, oh, it's not me, not my Tommy. My Tommy just saw some boobs and he shouldn't have seen them. It progresses to things that are violent. There's a school near where I live, and I've met enough families who have a student that go there. This is a middle school. And almost every young adult young person, they're not even young adults, young person at that school knows that there are 3 specific places they can go to view porn. Now, when we were younger, that didn't exist. I mean, there was the kid who had the Playboys in his locker, and it was awesome. And like, we'd go by there and everyone would like be over, like, I was short, so I'm trying to look over people and couldn't see it. We're talking about something significantly different. It's not a 2-dimensional image on paper. These 3 locations within this school, there's anime porn, there's consensual porn, and there is violence. So depending on what you want to see, they can go to these 3 areas, and that's what's being shared. You're like, well, not my person. They have a Pinwheel or Gab phone or whatever it is. Well, the other half of the school doesn't. And they're hovering around watching group violent rape and gangbangs as though it's something we used to watch when 2 jocks got into a fight outside of this school, 2 football players, and you're kind of like watching, you shouldn't be watching, but these guys punching each other. That's what they're watching now. So why do I share that? Because when you know there's a problem, the sooner you do something about it, the sooner you get to stop it before it gets to this progressive place and becomes life-threatening or something seriously, seriously terrible.
It's also not a boy problem.
No, it's not a boy problem. It's not a boy problem. Was a family recently whose son like decided to divorce his wife, and now he's got other problems, and we're in the family having this meeting, family council. And why we're having this safe place, and this because it's the first time everyone felt safe to start talking, and there was a great energy in the room. These 2 beautiful girls come and tell their dad about their pornography addiction, and we're talking about a ballerina and a pianist, and this poor dad just like, I don't even know if he'll ever be the same, but it's happening to men and women. A lot of times for girls, it's because they want to know what attracts boys, and they hear about it and they see it. So, oh my gosh, we could go off on this subject forever.
The other thing that I would say too is just that a lot of people will talk to me about time, and we kind of think about this in our own experience where you had to have enough time to find the videotape and put it in the cassette player and fast forward or rewind. And that took time and privacy. And those days are gone as well. So it takes milliseconds for them to have a pornography exposure, and to whether it's by accident or because they're seeking it out, it can take seconds. We've talked to lots of parents who their young child is on the couch with them, on the same couch with them, viewing pornography without the parents knowing. This is not the monster that it was 20 years ago. It's a different kind of monster. You got to get the right kind of ammo. Anyway, those are my thoughts too. Yeah. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah. You have another question too? Or okay. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So the question is, can we speak to some of the tools? Well, some of the tools that I know, again, I don't know if Danny has much of this on his website, but Smith has a resources page on his website on livelifebigger.org. The Griffin router is a great router to start with. One of the things I would also say, which is why I kind of talk about, you're willing to spend $1,000 on a phone, but you're not really willing to do anything. So no one thing is the right answer, right? So having a Griffin router helps with the Wi-Fi. There's lots of benefits. I'll let you, this kind of stuff is all on Raising Kids in Combat too. Having the Griffin router is a great thing. You can turn off areas. You can make, friends limited time. If a friend comes over and wants Wi-Fi, you can make it so that any friend that gets on there gets 30 minutes of Wi-Fi time. It can shut off in different areas at different times of day. Then there There are groups like Ever Accountable. Ever Accountable was started for pornography. It's an accountability. You have somebody that gets a report. It's report based. Even if that history is deleted, they still get a report that that site was visited. Then there are third-party parental control apps. Some people use Disney Circle. Some people use, whatever that may be. Custodio, I know is one. RPact is another one. There's lots of different third-party apps that you can use. But the idea is for best success is layering, the layering of all of these things. No one thing is an answer for that. Do you want to share some of your stuff too?
Okay. Sorry.
You bet. No.
So, yeah, sorry. Also, so in pornography, residential treatment centers. So I asked them, what do you do to ensure that there's no porn being watched? And they had no devices. And so they did all their computer stuff online. They had tons of filter. They actually had a person there watching the computer, and they had all of their screens up on one video monitor at the top, and they were still watching porn.
Yeah.
So
why it makes your life easier.
Yeah. And then also we had 2 filters. And so I would go on one filter and didn't see anything. But on the other filter, I could see something. And I didn't know how it was happening. It was because they were logging into the computer as a new user. So it was being tracked that way. So it was crazy to find that way. There's just really so many different ways around it that even when we took everything off the computer and said you can only be on it next to us, they were still using Google, Gmail, chat to talk with people and have all of these sexting conversations. So even if there's not there, and then they're getting on websites at school where they're being asked for sex for money. So it's almost unstoppable.
To some degree.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
As far as I've seen.
Yes. If you find a good bubble where we can live, let me know.
I want to add something to that to give you the honest answer, because this I get asked daily, and usually it's by someone in tears who's desperately trying to help. Your resources are limited. There are groups, there are books. We created a course that helps parents. But as far as a community to say, yes, it's my 15-year-old son, my 17-year-old son, my 18-year-old son, your options are extremely limited. Yeah. In Utah, I can speak, for example, because I go multiple times a week. I was at one last night, the night before. I took a young man, I took a grown man. There is a group, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is one of the biggest players in the United States of America as far as providing free group therapies. You can go to their website. We can link it there as well. Regardless, doesn't matter what you believe in. If you type in your zip code, you will find 5 or 6 meetings every week within a 2-mile radius of wherever you live. Now, there's outskirts of Utah, might be a little different, but for the most part, you can find a meeting within 2 miles of your house on any given night of the week.
And you can also join online. My mom.
You can join online, but yep. Correct. Yes. So she said there's ones that are online as well, and people can join those regardless of where they're at. And if they're worried about maybe running into someone, the truth is there's nothing more powerful to start the process and reaching out to someone. Yes, we want to do everything in-house. We want to protect our own families, to reach out to someone who's been through it, to be in a group of people who've been through it. Now, there's other groups, but again, if you're an alcoholic, well, my goodness, there are AA meetings everywhere. They have them at lunch. They have them for breakfast. They have them in the night. They have an afternoon group. It takes some effort. The only thing that doesn't work is trying to do it on your own, trying to handle it in-house. So you can search out. It's not just the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There's a few other churches who've put forth an effort of creating a meeting that's specifically tailored to this. But on that same note, group therapy has been around for a long time, and it's not the only answer. It's layering it, right? It's having a mentor. I think for young men and women, A mentor is a much better place to start than a therapist. And I'm not discrediting therapy. I'll tell you why. It's because just to get the ball rolling, they feel better and more comfortable talking to this person. They've usually been through it. I do a ton of mentoring. I know her son Smith's done some, but eventually when they become accustomed to talking and opening up, then a clinical therapist can help them, peel back the layers of the onion and figure out what's wrong, what's missing, what's hurting. It's also going into some groups. So you say, what are some other resources? There's books, there's groups, there's a guy named Jeff Stewart who has this, it's a class for marriages, right? Marriages that have been affected by, sexual crisis, but reach out to someone who has been through this experience and they'll point you in the right direction. But if you just want a starting point, like a jumping off place, is finding a meeting. And we'll link this so that you have that link to where you can look, and going to a place where for maybe the first time in your life, you can go into a group of humans and admit the struggles that you're dealing with, and guaranteed for the first time, you'll be supported and comforted by other people in the room. I went last night to a meeting. It was in Riverton, Utah. I took this young man in there. He was shaking. He got in there, was just like shaking. I promised him if the meeting was weird that I would just tell everyone in the room I had diarrhea and we'd leave so that he was comfortable. Because I have gone, I'll be honest, I've taken someone to a meeting. We walked in and there was one guy sitting in there. He's kind of a weird guy too. And I was like, okay. But we walked into this meeting yesterday and there was a room full of men. I think there were probably 16 men. There were construction workers. There were athletes. There was a doctor. Every walk of life, every race that you could find in that city there was someone of every race, background, occupation. Looking outside and there's cars that are falling apart. There was a Lamborghini, there was a Hummer, you get the point. All there because of the same problem. And for this young man to have that experience for the first time, to be somewhere where he didn't feel like the only one, because that's what it makes you feel like, is you're the only one. It was the most powerful experience, and he wanted to go back. He wanted to draw from that strength. So that would be one of the greatest resources and tools that you can do. It doesn't cost you anything. But the greatest resource and tool for mom and dad, yes, I do still think, is raising kids in combat. But those other groups I said that have support groups out there, they also have them for the family too, just to learn how it's affected them, like how to be more proactive.
More questions.
Yeah.
I would love to know if you have any tips or insight into how we can impress upon our kids the serious ramifications that can and will come if they continue to seek out porn and travel that path.
Man.
Did you listen really well when you were 16 to anything?
That's why I was pausing before I said this.
Oh, yeah.
The question is, how do we approach? Like, how do we come to this explanation with our child who doesn't want to hear anything from us about how serious this can become, right? Blah, 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 blah. Like, how do we actually address that with the proper respect so that they understand it? I don't know. My answer might not be what.
Well, you share yours. I have a thought too, but
you need someone to help that's not you. You are the greatest asset in their life. You are the single most influential, beautiful, powerful thing in their life. But at this time, with this problem, someone other than you. That again could be a mentor, someone who puts themselves out there, who helps, who speaks on this, who can just be the first person they talk to that might just say, hey, I understand, allows them to speak, and then can point them in the right direction.
The other resource I was going to suggest is you may have heard of the foundation called Fight the New Drug. They're a nonpartisan, non-religious organization that is doing incredible things globally against the fight against pornography. And the joy of Fight the New Drug, they have a docuseries called Brain Heart World. And I would strongly suggest you watch that with your family. Maybe watch it first if you want, take some notes, and then share that with your kids. But they talk much about, they leave any moral issue out of it. They talk about the science of what happens to your brain and what happens to your body and what happens to your own world, which I'm sure that's why they're calling it Brain Heart World, when you consume pornography, and the progressive nature of that. And it's all science-based. So a lot of people like to tell me that this is just a religion problem, and that's just not true. There is science behind it. The neural pathways in their brains are changing. And so that's another great resource I would say, is to watch something like that. They've done a great job of.
That's a hard question.
It is. It is.
I mean, the answer also was like, oh, well, call me and we'll go to the jail or the prison and speak to someone who a few years ago would have never imagined them being there. And now they're a listed pedophile. That's a hard one, because still the reaction is from a kid. They're like, well, not me. That's never going to happen to me ever. So I would say start with someone that can be real with them, where they can actually maybe interpret what's being said. Was there another one?
Yeah. It was kind of went along with that one, so maybe you answered it. A second question would be, any encouragement on how not to overtalk this when we catch our kids in a slip up, or when they come to us with a slip up? What does that conversation look like?
Oh, we'll celebrate it for a minute, right? This is a this one's difficult. And you'll probably hear different answers even from professionals in the industry. In the beginning phases, when these slip-ups happen, you celebrate them coming to talk to you. You take them to ice cream. Now, the slippery slope here, this is at like 14 or 13 and they tell you and you're celebrating it, you're hugging them and you're sharing your raw emotion, how grateful you are they came to speak to you. That's different than when they're 27 years old, still in your basement, divorced, and telling you they had another slip up and you've been defining insanity for 17 years. Oh, that one gets me. Yeah. But that hopefully helps. So celebrate it in the beginning, because we have a small problem and we have a really good chance of getting them some help. If it gets going to the point where there's no way in hell we're celebrating this anymore, then you fight.
Yeah, I mean, I like that answer of making sure. I think that it is a really good point, just of the safe space where, if we want our kids, again, it comes with practice. So if we want our kids to come to us with the big things, with the hard things, whether they're 27 or whether they're 5, we have to prove ourselves. And when you as a parent mess that up, when you freak out over whatever that may be, whether they were texting when they shouldn't have been or whatever, when we get emotional, which is again my plea for the dads, because they're so good at this. They're so good at just taking the emotion out of it. Moms, we just we cannot control our emotions. And that comes from fear. When I talk to teenagers and they say, how do I tell my parents? I say, communicate with them. Hey, I'm going to tell you something hard, and this is what I need from you. I need you to not respond today. We can talk tomorrow. I'm going to tell you something difficult, and I really need you to just listen. And then we can talk again tomorrow, but I don't want to hear anything. Set your parents up for success. And I would say the same thing for parents. When they come to you, regardless of what it is, we have to be better about removing the emotion, because it's all of that fear, right? That's how we're responding. We're responding out of fear and anxiety. And, it's not because we're mad at them necessarily. We're afraid of what that means down the road. Where does this lead? Where does that progressive action happen? So I think it's really important that we test that. And I think the celebration is a great way where you just say, man, thank you so much for sharing with me. That really must have been hard. And I just really appreciate you coming and sharing that with me. How can I support you?
I think on that same note is it's an opportunity to do what you haven't done yet, maybe. And that is explain to them that you're a human as well. We all want as parents to be like, put ourselves on this pedestal, right? Because it's what you're supposed to do so that your kids measure up to what you want them to be. But there's always the appropriate time. And it might be then when you have to tell them about a struggle you went through, something difficult you did as a child, some mistake that you had made. So many people avoid doing that because they feel like they're going to lose credibility as a parent. No, you're going to be relatable. Now your child feels like, oh my gosh, you're a human being too. You're not some glorified being. They can actually approach you and talk to you. It will not discredit your role as a parent to be a human with them. Yeah.
Okay. What are some good conversation starters? Like, do you have scripts that you would recommend?
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, how do you get it started?
Yep. I'm going to give you the teaser. Here's the salesman. Welcome to my infomercial. We spent a lot of time compiling these conversations on, and it's in the booklet with Raising Kids in Combat. We worked with professionals, the industry, interviewed people, compiled it. We came up with our own, just from all the people we worked with, and they are amazing. Most people, the feedback we've got is that they're using them word for word. We kind of wrote these scripts and said, hey, read them, make them your own, adjust what you need to adjust where you're comfortable saying things. But most people just have memorized them, practiced them, and they use them. So I can't give those away right now.
How do you get the booklet?
That
comes with the course. So if you attend in person or you purchase the digital copy online, you get it. As a downloadable PDF that you have it. And a lot of the resources that we've referred to about routers and resources and books and tools. I mean, there's amazing books on that resources page. And again, some of this is on her son's website as well as mine. Or if it's easier to use the social media, it's Live Life Bigger or Your Living Proof. We have a resources link that has books. Like there's amazing books, like good pictures, bad pictures, and there's all age appropriate things of like how to start these conversations. So reach out.
Yeah.
You don't even have to say you have a problem yet. You could just say you're curious of how to help someone if it was to happen. And then we can at least point you in the right direction.
We're good.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I just plead with everyone to think, do not fall victim to the worst thing possible, thinking this couldn't happen to you.
Yeah. Yeah, because your kid's already thinking that, right? Yeah. Your kid's already thinking, well, that wouldn't be me.
That wouldn't be me. This is not going to happen in our house.
It's not going to happen to me. This is not dangerous. Mom and dad are crazy. This isn't me. And when we join that same camp, again, we're sitting ducks.
Yeah. If you think of all the threats that we deal with in life, there's COVID, there's car accidents, there's heart disease. The number one killer in life right now, the number one killer between 18 and 45 is fentanyl overdose. One drug. It is almost triple deaths of COVID or heart disease just on its own, that one drug. With all that said, there's no statistics, studies, nothing being done, a way to quantify anything. No. The number one threat to all of our families, because it's in your home while you're watching your favorite show, your reruns of whatever, is terrible, horrendous videos being played in your home. And it's not because her son always uses my favorite line. I wasn't a bad kid. I was a really good kid wrapped up in bad content. So just know it's happening. Don't worry and think, is it happening more? It's happening. So just be prepared so you can play offense instead of reacting to the situation.
Yeah. And know who our enemy is. I mean, the enemy is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's multi-billion dollars, and it's in every home across America. So what are you going to do about that? And stop being afraid of it and start figuring out how you're going to fight it. Because it's there. And if it's not there yet, it's coming. It's quick and quiet. So
thanks for listening to us.
Yeah. Thank you.